We were particularly taken by this for its simplicity, the lightness with which it sits on the land, and the sort of wonderful way it's lifted up and gets a porch underneath, which in that climate is probably used 6 months of the year. Also in the interior, kind of a somewhat unusual but really refreshing move is to have gangnail trusses that are painted white, and that's played off with this horizontal natural wood casework that sits underneath the trusses, which is very simple and straightforward, and we all are really fond of this project.
Choosing to paint parts of it white kind of roots it in a history that much older buildings in settings like this often had, and so then it merges that sense of contemporary with something historical that separates it from other projects like this.
Yeah, Mirror Point College is just tight and taut, great tension and release. This contrast between, the striking contrast between the whitewashed gangnail truss elevates the natural wood. It's been used very masterfully.
We were so impressed by the level of the students' efforts, and first of all, their deep understanding, as they call it, their lifetime knowledge of the traditions in the area. It's like a wonderful place to go. We're all ready to hike there and spend time there. But just a really remarkably clear system. It was built so fast. It's just
2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks. I mean, it's really a wonderful, and it's 2 structures. We really felt this was an extraordinary effort. I mean, one of the best student-built projects I've ever seen.
I can imagine on a cold winter's hike that almost any building would be wonderful to find in the woods, but somehow these are kind of unexpected delight to come across. Student-made structures can, in some ways, reflect their setting and even improve their setting. It seems remarkable given the beauty of the setting they're already in.
Yeah, this is the type of program that you think should be mandatory at all schools of architecture, to have the students have a hands-on experience of constructing their designs and realizing the implications of what they design and what they built within budgetary and time frames, but a couple of extraordinary follies providing both shelter and lookout, getting, I guess, both ends of the spectrum of design challenges.
I think we were all struck understanding the challenges of this scale and building. You try to use timber at getting into this size of building. There's a sense that at every turn they addressed those challenges masterfully and created spaces that seem like wonderful places and a variety of places for students to have as their home away from home.
Particularly compelling was the site plan, I mean, the building diagram that creates 2 courtyards and that uses wood on the underside of the building and in places where the wood is protected and yet provides the warmth of the wood as you come in and out of the building. It's a constant part of the student's experience. And the way the building flows out into the landscape, and it's a wonderful landscape site plan, and the constant connection to nature throughout the building, whether it's upon entry or up in the common spaces or in each individual room, is really, really well done.
Yeah, it's incredible that they take these simple rectangular masses, raise them above the ground, and in the write-up it talks about the serpentine and being able to come up with a serpentine typology, I guess, or a planning layout out of a series of rectangles is impressive in itself, let alone the level and the degree of the intimacy and the warmth of the social spaces for the students that kind of stitch together the experience.
I think it's intended as a prototype for other trades colleges, and it really evokes and takes advantage of that northern condition. One of the things I was particularly taken by was the daylighting that's achieved and the use of color and the modulation of light, getting light into the building, which granted it's pretty dark there quite a bit of the year, but the use of daylighting, the separation between the structure and the roof, your constant reference to the outside, and then this use of color, both for the glass itself to transform the light, but also mixed with the natural wood is a really nice combination. It's a big building, and it has a lot of very comfortable, intimate spaces for students to meet, not just to develop their trade, but also as a kind of community of people studying together.
Yeah, I can say not even those social spaces, which are done amazingly with a lot of sense of playfulness, but the serious business of learning these shop trades in these spaces that the architect has elevated is almost spiritual. Spiritual
Yeah.
sense of learning these shop trades with this ethereal light. Washing and warming that wood, and everything's just considered. They could have just gone, hodgepodge with the systems coordination, but they buckled down and they've just treated it masterfully for such a complex set of equipment that are service and distribute to the building.
I think there's a sense of respect for the students that will be learning in these spaces that I think is very appealing and appropriate for this kind of building. I think you've seen that often, and there's a sense even in the rawness and the exposure of systems and ducts and conduit that somehow it couldn't have been any other way. And so that sense of variety and care let this stand apart.
This was one that we all really fell in love with. Want to go stay there. Everyone tries to make something that's flexible and operable, and people can move there and modulate it to fit the time of day or the time of year. But I think this really pulls it off. I mean, these hydraulically balanced shutters that can lift up and extend the interior space out to the decks, provide sun shading and protection, are really, it repeats throughout the building, and it's just a really clever and well executed solution to giving flexibility in this relatively small, modest building.
It seems like a kind of type of building that's a classic, this kind of small cottage on an extraordinary setting, and so it found a way to make it wholly unexpected, the resolution, and at the same time it seems wholly necessary that it have been resolved this way.
Yeah, it's with the naming of the modular unit, its expression is anything but modular. It's modular, and yet it's not modular because it introduces so much motion, movement, slatted walls. They're shading devices, they're canopies. You've got the movement of the sun path, the different shade and shadow that happens. This modular building that's in a constant state of activity.
Given the complexity that exists on the outside, both tectonically and temporally, as things get adjusted, there's a kind of restraint on the inside that seems like an appropriate counterbalance to them.
And it's a really common London problem where the kitchen is in the lower level, and yet you want access to these wonderful gardens mid-block. And it solves this really masterfully. There's a height constraint, adjacent walls between gardens, and also keeping the building low enough that the upper floors can still look into the common space. And so they're really working with very tight constraints and developing a skylit roof, this very narrow sandwich that is really beautifully executed with all the services running in it. And it provides this very comfortable transition from this Georgian house into the landscape.
Yeah, I was really struck by the adjacent conservative conservatory and this proposition, which is anything but conservative, highly contemporary, extremely well considered, every detail thought through.
Yeah, each of the challenges that were faced were joined together and resolved in a way where each decision supports the next.
Just imagine just relaxing at the end of the day, your long London commute perhaps.
Taking on a shallow glazed roof in that rainy climate and getting it to work well. It's masterfully done.
impressed and just so struck by the high quality of the entries in this field of 148, with the international contingent certainly holding up well, but the width and breadth of the quality of the submissions, both internationally and across North America, holds well for where we are, I guess, with wood design in North America and internationally. And we know we've always been developing on a very strong path, and the future looks extraordinary for wood.
I think it was great to see a variety of building types in the submissions. You can see the different kinds of challenges that architects and teams are confronting as they try to bring large scale or mass timber use into these different building types. As we were evaluating them, trying to understand those particular challenges and see in what ways certain of these projects could help all of us understand ways to address those challenges in order to help move these ideas into readier acceptance.
I love this jury. It's always such great work to look at, and I know always to see the publication that comes out of it is a pleasure, and I think we all learn from it and keep referring to it. The range of scale and in uses of wood, whether it's being used structurally, whether it's the envelope, the exploration of different ways wood is used in the envelope, whether it's shingle, whether it's wood siding, panelized. I think there were lots of interesting variations on that. And then the meticulousness of detailing, whether it's fairly complicated, exotic detailing, or whether it's very elemental, simple, straightforward detailing. I think there's a really interesting set of clever solutions. Also in the interior, whether it's interior paneling or millwork or casework, I mean, there's some really exquisite examples of the use of wood. But I think beyond the use of wood, the caliber of entries in this awards program is unusually high, and it usually is unusually high. And it's been a pleasure to work with my distinguished colleagues, and we've had and to look at this wonderful work, and I think it's just really high level architecture, and it's also very elegant and inventive use of wood.
Yeah, there are a lot of ways that people found to use wood beyond structural issues, but I think people respond well to wood buildings that have simply because of the warmth and that natural connection. But a lot of these projects found ways to extend that even further, to take advantage of the properties and kind of aging and changing of wood over time, to let a kind of an element of time enter the buildings inventively that I think I certainly hadn't seen some of those before, and I think that's very exciting that there continue to be new ways to think about this material that seems so familiar.
Yeah, spectacular, inspiring. Wood is good.
Great.